Hi everyone, it's Darlene. Welcome back for another card. Today's card uses a couple of stamp sets that were just released by Simon Says Stamp. The first is Lila's Heart. It's got some cute sentiments, these little girls in it. And the second is this diagonal stripe background stamp. I'm also going to be using this Irresistible spray. I think it's Angel Pink. I'll have the link on my blog post. And then this A2 die that I'm not going to actually use to cut. I'm just going to use it as a guide. Now I'm going to stamp this girl in the middle of my cardstock using the grid, and you can line it up perfectly because it's the center of the heart, and right in between her legs you can line up with that center line on the grid download. So I'm going to ink this up with some Memento Tuxedo Black, stamp it down. I did not need to stamp it again. And then I'm going to go ahead and stamp it on just some scratch paper. Mine just happens to be a circle. Now I'm going to color this with Copics. The first is going to be some RV colors, and I have found recently that I think it's better, it comes out with a better blend if you cover your entire area with the lightest color first. It sort of primes the paper, gets some alcohol ink on there so that you can have better blending. And then for the part that's going to go underneath, I'm just going to color it with the RV14 solid because you're really not going to see it. Now for her hands, I'm using E30 and E31, so I'm going to have to color them on both sheets here, and I'm going to cut out that scratch sheet. For her legs, I'm using these same colors, and I'm just going to create some shadow underneath her dress and just to the side and at the bottom of her legs, and then blend it back in with the E30. Now for the hair, I tried it two different ways. I tried dark to light and light to dark, and I liked the dark to light better. So I went over all these scribbly lines with the E57 first. Then I took my E55 and I went next to, so the same scribbles, but I'm doing it next to the lines that I created with the E57. So I'm kind of doing it on both sides of these strands to kind of fill in the gaps. And then finally I took my E53 and I just sort of colored in all the areas that I had missed, but I did let the strings sort of dangle at the bottom. Now I created a little perspective here on the top of her head with the E57, and then I blended that out a little bit with the E55, and then I went back in and darkened it up just a little bit just because I didn't want it to be too light in the different areas. So this is my E55. Okay, so for her shoes I just did a very simple E57 and then blended it with an E51. And then her dress, I used a few BG colors. Again, I decided to go ahead and color the whole thing with my lightest color first, and color around the strands for her hair so that they sort of are laying on her back. Then I went in with the BG11 after I colored the darker areas on the left-hand side. And I'm going to go ahead and color this in a different color with some yellow later, so I want to let that dry first. And then I'm going to color the heart with my Wink of Stella clear pen. I found that all I really ever use is this clear one. I have a couple of the colored ones, but I hardly ever use them. So I'm going to cut out the hands and heart on this piece. Alright, now I'm going to take my A2 die, and I'm just going to use it as a guide because I wanted the hearts to kind of create an arc. So I'm just going to draw a pencil line, and I'll take this heart, which also comes in the set, but it's a tiny bit smaller than the heart that she's holding. I'm using some Barn Door Distress ink, and I'm lining up the top part of the heart where the 2 points come together with the pencil line that I just drew. And you'll notice that I missed a spot on that one heart, so I'm going to have to fix that. And I decided to use my Stamp-O-Majig, so I'm going to prep it with the Barn Door ink, and then I'm just going to ink up the corner, the part that I missed, place it right on top. That way, make sure that I do this correctly because I've already spent a bunch of time Copic coloring this and I don't want to mess it up. And I only did 2 hearts on the left side because I decided I'm going to trim it back later. Okay, just erasing my pencil marks, and then I want my sentiment to also be that same arc. So I put it on a block, and then I used my die to kind of wrap it. So I kind of picked it up off the block and moved it over a little bit so I would get that same exact shape. I'll ink it up with some VersaFine Black Onyx and center it right there at the top. Now I'm going to use the Irresistible. And this it's like a Pico embellisher. It's not a spray. I'm sorry, I think I called it a spray earlier. But it's got a very, very fine tip. And it's kind of like Glossy Accents, but it's thinner. So it's kind of more liquidy, I guess. It's not so thick, and so it doesn't rise up as high, so it's more flat on your cardstock. But it gives a nice little shine. It's not too bright. It's not too glossy. It's just a nice kind of added embellishment for some texture. So I'm going to color all these in. And you just have to squeeze it a little bit, and I was able to pretty much color them inside the lines without any problem. And you see how it has this little thing that goes inside your tip to make sure it doesn't clog. Now I've been buying a lot of this paper, this tone-on-tone paper that I'm using as a background, and I've been waiting for the right striped stamp set or stamp background to come along to kind of make my own, and I think this is a really good one for it. It's the Diagonal Stripes by the Simon Says stamp you saw earlier. So what I'm going to do first is I'm going to take my Barn Door Distress ink, and I'm going to ink up this piece of scratch cardstock. It's just, I think it's 1.5 inches wide, and I'm doing very, very light pressure. Because I just want a very light layer of ink, and I find that if you prime your applicator first, so get some ink on it, use it on a scratch sheet of paper, and then use it again on your real paper, and you'll get better even coverage. Now this has to be really dry, so I dried it with a heat tool. Now that my blue is dry, I'm going to go in and create dots with this Y11 marker. This is real time, so you can see exactly how fast and how long I'm holding this marker down to my paper before I lift it up. And then I'm going to speed it up in just a second here. But what it does is it pushes the blue out of the way and colors the dot yellow. It's a neat look because you can see the yellow inside the blue. So I'm going to finish that up and create some grass because I don't like to have my images sort of floating in the paper. I like to create, you know, either like a grounding of gray or a shadow of some sort, and I decided I wanted her to be in the grass. I'm also going to cover up her shoes a little bit with the grass. Now because I'm going to be embossing this, I want to make sure that it's dry because the distressed ink takes a while to dry. So it was dry. I tested it with some embossing powder to make sure it didn't stick. Now I'm inking my stamp up with some Versamark ink. And I'll put my cardstock on there, make sure I've got really good pressure. I find that it's easier to use a scratch sheet of paper to make sure that I get even pressure over the whole entire image. Alright, so I put some clear embossing powder and I heat set it so you can see it's shiny. Now the next step to create the other tone of this tone-on-tone is to go back with the same exact ink. I'm just making sure it's not sticky. And now I'm going to really put some heavy color in, and I found that really kind of twisting it and putting a lot of pressure on my cardstock worked the best. And you don't have to worry about getting block marks because you're going to have all that area that's resisted, so it blends really easily. There's no problem here. So I just ink this up all the way to the bottom, and that way you get a really nice tone-on-tone that you've used the same color with. So I had a light color of Barn Door, then I had a dark color of Barn Door. And so I've used this technique before, and I just love the way it looks because you don't have to worry about getting two colors that match. Okay, so now I've got my heart, and I'm putting some foam adhesive on the top and a two-way glue pen on the bottom because I want it to sort of project out of the paper. So her arms are sort of against her head, and then she's lifting the heart up from the paper. So if you look at the photo, it kind of, you can see it. Now I'm going to turn to the side so you can see how it's flat on the left and then it raises up on the right hand side. Okay, I split my striped piece down the middle, and then I put the middle side on the outside to make sure it was nice and clean. And I usually make my strips a little bit longer than I need so I can trim them, and I know they'll be long enough. Now I'm using my Scotch foam tape to pop my center panel up just a little bit. Put that right in the center. And then I had just a little bit extra, so I trimmed it from the other side. And that's it for the card today. So there's a lot of texture in it, some interest, but it's still pretty clean and simple. I hope you enjoyed it, and I'll see you next time. Thanks for watching.